for the state of the nation. And what we'd like to highlight today and focus on is the rains that have been pounding the country for the last few days. And according to the meteorological department, and we're hoping to be joined by Patricia Nyanguro, who's a principal meteorologist, who's going to be giving us an indication of how we should expect, or what we should expect in the not too distant future. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. A quick reminder that you're welcome to participate in this conversation. We'll have the Twitter handles displayed as we go along, and you're welcome to ask the questions that you have. But let me introduce the panelists that we have this morning. We are joined in studio by none other than Mr. Abwao, who is a PR, a public relations and communications manager for Red Cross. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And from our coast studio, we are also joined by Colonel Cyrus Oguna, who is a government spokesperson. Thank you for joining us, sir. And I'll be coming back to you in just a bit. But let me start with you, Peter. How are we doing so far in regards to our preparedness with the current situation that we have when it comes to the rains?
Thank you very much, Gitonga. The situation has been fairly bleak. Fortunately, I must say that it was not unexpected. We had these warnings from the meteorological department, and they have rightly said that they will be here. They will be able to confirm that. So various agencies that are involved in the response began putting in place some contingency measures to be able to respond. Unfortunately, the situation has been very, very bad. So sometimes that is probably why we have the situation looking as it is.
Okay. Maybe just to understand from Red Cross, because the Red Cross always seems to be somewhat ready for any disaster, this included. What are the measures that you put in place as Red Cross to ensure that when this is coming, you have staff, you have emergency, equipment, everything seems to be almost ready for a disaster anytime that it happens?
So what happens at Red Cross is that most of the time we tend to want to prepare for this kind of situations. And preparing means that we are talking to the relevant government agencies. And in this case, we had been discussing the potential to have flooding with the Kenya Meteorological Department as far back as August. So we had an indication of a possibility of flooding in the areas that were going to be affected. So what Red Cross did is to look at the things we could do. First, we wanted to work with communities to be able to warn them, to be able to prepare them that this was going to happen. Secondly, of course, we positioned our personnel and our equipment in areas that we had been advised that were likely to experience flooding. So as soon as it began, we had some of our personnel on the ground. We had some of the non-food items that we needed to distribute to people who could potentially be displaced. Our teams were ready to conduct rescues where necessary and relocate people. Where
that was needed.
Where that was needed.
Okay.
And of course, the other thing, let me just mention, the other thing that we did is that once we had these advisories from the meteorological department, we send out through bulk SMS to specific areas, warning people that this could happen and advising them on the kind of action that they needed to take.
All right. And allow me now to bring in Colonel Cyrus Oguna, who's the government spokesperson. And thank you for joining us, sir, bright and early from Mombasa. Now, let's start first of all with just you letting the nation know where we are in terms of our preparedness when it comes to this particular rain that has, hit Kenya and the floods that we've had so far.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gitonga, for inviting me to the studio. As government, we have been continuously monitoring the situation on the ground and providing necessary support assistance to alleviate the suffering of the people. As of now, as government, we have been able to assess the extent of damage in various counties, and in totality, there are 32 counties that have been affected. And the government has continued to provide assistance to all those countries. Now, we have also been able to determine that about 330,000 people have been affected across the country, and those that have been able to lose their households are about 17,000. And the government has put some of them in in camps within the various counties and is providing assistance to all of them. So yes, the government is in control of the situation and is consistently monitoring and offering relief assistance.
All right. According to a statement that you gave not too long ago, we already had 134 lives lost. And one might argue that 134 lives is one too many to be saying that we are prepared, sir.
Indeed, even one life of a Kenyan is one too many.
Absolutely.
That is something that we must accept. But again, you must also appreciate that disaster is not something that you can stop as a government. No government stops any disaster.
That's true. We
What
cannot
the
stop
government
it,
would
but
do
we
is to
already
try
had we already had advisory from the meteorological department, and as a result, we should be ready.
It is the action of the government that these figures that you've mentioned. In fact, as of now, the figures stand at 140. If the government was not ready, the situation would have been much worse than that.
That's true, it would have been worse, but just like you've said, sir, one life is one too many. So 140, that's way too many lives to be saying as government that we are prepared. Where are we going wrong?
I think the government has been able to do the best it can. It has been able to respond to various situations where it arises. But remember, this is a disaster. And in a disaster, you cannot sometimes be able to predict with degree of accuracy where it's going to happen. We can predict rain, but you cannot predict whether there's going to be a landslide.
All right.
So what we've been able to do as government is to give out an advice. So just allow me to finish.
Okay.
To give out an advisory that people should move to safer areas. And some have moved, others perhaps are not so quick to move, and those that are not quick to move, unfortunately, some of them have been able to become victims of the situation.
All right, I'll come back to you in just a bit, Mr. Abwao. Do you agree that this is a disaster? Specifically, because when I look at the definition of a disaster, it is something that happens that you are not aware of. But this, we had been given indication by the meteorological department, is coming. And we still have an advisory that we should expect more.
Well, it still falls in the realm of a disaster because, it's a natural disaster. Like the government spokesman says, we can get advisory that it's going to rain, but the intensity of that rain and we cannot quite predict. And then there are things like landslides, how long it's going to rain. These are things that we cannot predict with certainty, with accuracy. Mm-hmm. And that's where the challenge actually comes in.
In terms of preparedness, what is it that we need to do? Because as much as we cannot predict landslides, we are able to tell which areas are prone to those landslides and maybe be proactive rather than reactive.
Yes, and for me, I think, like I said earlier, what we have done is to provide these public warnings. One of the things that we've realized at Red Cross, unfortunately, is that some people are not heeding the warnings that are given either by government or by Red Cross. Sometimes we have had to, plead with people to be able to, to move from those areas that we think will be affected. And this increases the chances that they will actually fall victims. Mm-hmm. But if we heeded those advisories, I think we would be able to minimize at least the loss of lives that are occasioned when these natural disasters occur.
All right, let me come to you, Mr. Oguna. And the question here is, what can government do to ensure that those advisories do not go to waste? And when I say go to waste, even now, the meteorological department has mentioned that we should expect rainfall, heavy rainfall for the next few days. There are people who've been asked to move from certain areas, and chances are they may not move. Is there anything government can do to ensure that these people move? Because really, we're talking about a matter of life and death here.
Yes, we are working with various organizations to ensure that there is education, make our people aware to be able to respond positively to various advisories that are given by the government. We're working with the churches, we are working with the civil organizations, CBOs, but we also brought into the whole chain the various ngaos that are represented all the way to the ground to ensure that this information is passed to our various stakeholders. But what we're increasingly also getting to know is that some of our people are unwilling, or maybe not but perhaps not respond appropriately to these advisories, for the simple reason that sometimes they feel that if they move away from a place where their kin have been buried, maybe the grave to their mother is there, the grave to their father is there, they have got cows, they have got sheep, they have got other property, which they cannot move away with. And they find it, therefore, a bit difficult to move and leave these things behind. But we're increasingly making them aware that these are things that you can be able to acquire. For instance, you can be able to buy another sheep, you can be able to buy another goat, you can get another property. But you got only one life. Once you lose it, then you can't be able to get it again. So that education is what we're trying to ensure that it is well received on the ground, that they're able to respond to it, and we have collaborated together with various other agencies to be able to pass that information across.
Are there funds set aside for those kind of moves? Because some of the difficulty facing some of those people that need to move possibly is, one, where to go, and secondly, because you're going to a new environment, you may not be financially prepared to make that move.
Yeah, that's a good question. What the government normally does is that it prepares a certain location and advises people to move to that location, and is able to mobilize resources to provide assistance to those who would have moved to that location or such locations. Now, the reluctance of people to move to such locations is what sometimes is a bit, disturbing, and you can't force them to move because, like I did mention earlier, that there are those that, argue that how do I leave this property behind? I have cows, I cannot move with them. Yeah, so those are some of the challenges that are on the ground, but increasingly we're passing on information to them, trying to, inform them that you've got only one life to live, and once it's gone, it's gone.
Once it's gone, it's gone. And like they say, vitu kwa ground who are different. Allow me now to bring in Patricia Nyanguro, who was to join us in studio, but is able to join us via telephone. Patricia, thank you for joining us. She's the principal meteorologist. And first of all, Patricia, just to understand from the meteorological department point of view, when you issue these advisories like has been done before, what is it that you expect government to do?
Well, when we issue the advisory, we send it to all the line ministries. And for example, we send it to the National Disaster Operations Center, we send it to media, we send to all the ministries that are involved. And what we would expect them to do is to put plans in place to be able to safeguard residents in regions where we expect to have a high impact.
Okay.
So when we give
go on.
When we give the advisory, we give associated instructions and general advice, and then we expect that the relevant ministries will act on them.
Okay, and how detailed is your advisory? Because for it to be helpful and for it to have impact, it needs to have some level of detail and accuracy. How accurate would you tell me to be, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being least and 10 being very accurate?
So we have a model that we use to give the advisory, and we give a probability of occurrence or a certainty. And for the most recent advisory that we gave, we had up to a 66% chance. And so we give areas of concern in terms of counties. We mention exactly what counties are expected to receive the heavy rainfall, and then we also give associated impacts in terms of landslides and flooding that we expect based on the heavy rainfall that we project.
All right, we'll come back to you, Patricia, just to give us an indication of what we should expect, because I believe the meteorological department has already said that we should expect a few more days of heavy rains. But let me go back to the government spokesperson, Colonel Cyrus Oguna. And we've talked about the government maybe giving some financial help to those who need to move. But as we speak, there are those who've been displaced. There are those who possibly have been forced out of their normal area of residence. This means that they possibly are out of their income. They're not able to get about their activities, whether it is farming, selling goats or whatever. What is government doing to ensure that those people, are taken care of?
Thank you very much. The government has a policy that for those that will have lost their loved ones in situations of this kind, there will be support that will be provided. And that is a policy of the government, and there is no debate about that. And when people now move into those camps, then the government provides assistance to them. Now, for those that would have lost their household, maybe like a house is swept away, then the government, again, in collaboration with other agencies, will provide them with materials to help them go and restart life. But those that would have moved into the camp, yet they still have got their homes and houses intact, then what will be done is that the government will provide assistance to them in the camps. But once they go back to their home, then they must be able to start off on their own. Because the government would not provide real homes for those that already have got homes. Yes.
All right, let me come to you, Peter. And I'm sure as Red Cross, by virtue of the fact that you're on the ground, what are some of the things that you'd like to advise government that should be in place that possibly you find make it very difficult for you to even do your work in terms of rescue?
Well, we can't talk about advising government because
but I'm sure there are recommendations you can make.
Yes, whatever recommendations we have, you see, we sit our team is constantly consulting with government. So, we are always discussing. We are always doing these things together. For example, yesterday, I, myself, and our director were in Makueni with Interior CS Fred Matiang'i and Eugene Wamalwa. Basically, we are carrying out these operations together. So, I would not be in a place to say that we are advising government because we are carrying out these operations.
Maybe it's the term that I've used that's wrong, as opposed to advise, recommend. And the reason why I ask that is because, or let me put it this way to you, are we well prepared for the floods that we're having right now? Do you find like we're well equipped?
Certainly, we could do more.
What's the more that we can do?
We could do more. I think probably just to make sure that when this advice is and I do agree with the government spokesperson, probably use the local administration more to be able to prepare people so that they can actually take that advice. Those are some of the things that we should be able to do.
Would that be in form of civic education? Would it be maybe doing more media, engagement with people so that they understand the gravitas of what we're talking about?
Absolutely. More civic education, using people on the ground, government personnel on the ground, and this in many places where it has been well done. For example, in Makueni, where I was yesterday, you remember on Sunday, the county commissioner was on the ground, actually personally leading, mobilizing people to leave certain areas, and that actually helped to reduce, the casualties that could have resulted from the landslides that eventually did happen. So that kind of action is what we would like to see replicated across the country, so that we can minimize loss of life.
All right, let me come to you, Patricia. And the Meteorological Department has told us that we should expect more rainfall. Maybe just give us an indication. Are we talking about the same kind of rainfall? Is it likely to increase? How long are we looking at, Patricia?
Well, so we are at the cessation of the seasonal rainfall. So it usually ends in December, towards the end of December. But based on the forecast that we gave for the month of December, we still expect to have higher than normal rainfall amounts throughout most parts of the country. And this is expected to dissipate as the month of December comes to an end. So for this week and the next, we still are expecting a high rainfall amount. And we will keep giving advisories in case we see, because the one we've given right now is up to Friday, December the 6th. So we are still monitoring the situation. If we expect high rainfall amounts, we will issue more advisories.
You'll issue more advisory. Thank you very much. Let me now go to the government spokesman. And in terms of preparedness, we are having floods now. Then later we have drought. What is the government, the disaster management authority doing to ensure that this doesn't go to waste?
Thank you very much, Mr. Gitonga. Now, before I answer that question, let me also just address an issue about preparedness. I just wish to let the country know that there is no government that can be able to stop disaster from happening. Even the best of the countries, the best technology, Japan, US, Indonesia, China, they suffer this kind of disasters with all that technology. So indeed, even as we want to improve our disaster response mechanisms, I think it's appropriate to also appreciate the fact that disasters will always happen. So what, as a government, we need to do is to try and put mechanisms in place to ensure that as and when they happen, their impact is minimized, but they'll always happen.
Okay, so
now,
carry on.
Now, coming to your question about now what we need to do as a government is that we are continuously going to keep on talking to our people, ensuring that they receive civic education that is able to ensure that everybody is aware, and that when advisories are issued, then it can be responded to appropriately.
All right, Colonel, one matter of concern is that we have floods right now, a lot of water, which
Yes.
we seem not to be very efficient in harvesting. Then later on, we have another disaster of drought. What is government doing, or where is government placed when it comes to ensuring that this water does not just go to waste? It doesn't just kill us, but also becomes a benefit. Somebody said, and allow me to just mention, they say that what God gives us as a blessing can turn out to be a curse because of not being prepared.
Indeed, very true, and like rightfully said, in a couple of months back, we were actually dealing with the drought situation, and the government was providing water. Now that transited very quickly to floods, and the government is now being asked to take the water away. So as government, what we are trying to do, and we've been trying to ensure that we build enough dams, enough reservoir to be able to harvest water, so that during situations of drought, we have sufficient water to be able to provide to our people, but also to be able to use for irrigation. But largely and majorly, as we move forward, it becomes also important that as a people, we must be able to get into the practice and the culture of harvesting water and conserving water at our own local levels. That is what the government must do, but it's also what I myself as an individual, can do for myself, so that not every amount of rain that falls, is washed away and runs into the rivers and to the oceans. So even you as the media people, we are asking you to also try and educate our people to increasingly get into the practice and the culture of harvesting water and conserving water. The government will do what it has to do, which is to build dams and to build road reservoirs, but it's what we must do as individual nationals.
All right. Peter, maybe give us tips on how to manage ourselves in case of disaster. I've seen, people driving through, rivers, trying to drive through rivers, and of course that cannot be blamed on government. Sometimes it's pure carelessness on our part.
Yes, you're right, Kitonga. In our advisories, we have listed a few of the actions that people need to take if they are faced with a flooding situation. You have rightfully said that people tend to probably want to be too brave. They want to take so much risks and drive through flooded roads at high speed. Some, want to try and drive through a river. In some places like in the Ukambani areas, you have these seasonal rivers where sometimes you see there's no water, and then all of a sudden there is water. So we've been advising people to take a lot of caution. Inside the houses, of course, we want people to know that when you see your floor your house beginning to flood, there are simple things that you can do. For example, switch off your electricity. Begin to move out when it's still early, so that you do not get marooned in those flooding situations. People have been rescued marooned in places where the water did not just rise suddenly. At least it was gradual. If people took the earliest opportunity to move, at least we would be able to minimize those situations. So those are some of the things that we keep giving these advisories. We've been working with the media, both at national and even within the sub-counties, at the local radio stations, issuing these bulk SMSs, and we just want to urge people to take that advice seriously, and then be able to protect themselves from harm.
Okay, and the only way I think one can prepare for disaster is to ensure that you have information beforehand, because when it happens, really, it's up to you to make a decision on the spur of the moment. What do you feel maybe needs to be increased in terms of information to the people before this happens? And we're having floods now.
Yes.
At some point they may end, but we may have floods again. But we never seem to, be conscious of what needs to be done. Do we need to include it in our education system? What do you think government can do to ensure that they enhance more information to the people?
Yes, we can do many of those things. We can, include this disaster preparedness. For example, we know that now, because of climate change, these things are going to become even more regular. They have already become more regular. Flooding, transitioning to drought very, very frequently. So that can happen. But then again, also, back to the media. The challenge that, of course, we have is that, now we are talking about it so much. But only, a few weeks ago, probably at the beginning of August, when the Met was giving these warnings, maybe as the media, we also need to you also need to pick it up, earlier and begin to also make it part of your regular programming, so that people can get these warnings earlier.
Enough. All right, Patricia, maybe just give us an indication of what to expect. And are we talking about the next 7 days? Are we talking about a month? What is it that we should expect as Kenyans in regards to the rains and flooding situation?
So we have different time resolution forecasts. So every Monday evening we issue weekly forecast, then we issue a 5-day forecast as well. So based on the latest 5-day forecast, we expect that most parts of the country, especially within the southern half, are expected to continue to have rainfall over several places. And this is high rainfall amounts. And the advisory we issued also ends on 6th, but before then, if there is a situation that warrants another advisory, we will issue it. On a monthly level, we had issued the monthly forecast for December that indicated most regions of the country, including the northeast and the northwest, are expected to receive higher than normal or higher than usual rainfall amounts. So we disseminated this, and we continue to engage with our clients on social media and even on our website.
Right, and maybe access to that information. Not everybody is on WhatsApp, not everybody has a radio, not everybody has a television. What is the Met Department doing to ensure that people actually have this information? Or what are the channels that you use to get this information out?
So we have county directors in all the 47 counties. So they downscale the information that we produce at the national level, and then they disseminate this to their users. Most of the county directors do this using SMSs, and they have, within the counties, there are farmer groups and groups of people who receive weather information from one particular person. So the county directors do that for us. On a national level, we are on all social media platforms, and we also have a mailing list where we send our forecast. So we're really trying hard to reach as many people as possible with the information.
All right, thank you. And let me come now to Colonel Cyrus Oguna, government spokesperson. What do you have to tell Kenyans for that? We've heard from Patricia what we're expecting in the next few days. What message would you have for Kenyans?
Thank you very much. I did not hear very well what Patricia did mention regarding the advisory and how it goes down. But I just wish also to add, if at all she did not mention this, that the advisory would get to the government, and the government passes the same to the grassroots through the Ngao system. So everybody in up to the grassroots level is supposed to get this information, because it goes down to the local sub-chiefs, who are the first contact with the local people. So yes, the advisory gets down to the last mile, so to speak. Now, we also wish to inform our local people, because based on the experience that we saw in West Pokot, or that most of the ground is actually, the soil is bare, totally bare. There's been a lot of deforestation, and the soil is very loose. And therefore, we're also asking our people to be able to take advantage of the rainy season to plant trees. Plant as many trees as you can, because when the ground is not necessarily compact together, it is very susceptible to landslides or even mudslides. So we'd also ask the media to help the government in this so that you can be able to convey this information to our people, that is important to be able to plant trees, not just for now, but even for future generations.
All right, and in case...
The second thing I'd wish to talk about...
Go on.
Is that there are 3 areas that are currently facing imminent threat of flooding. In addition to the other, these areas are Busia, Tana River, and Garissa, or even areas of Masinga. We're also issuing out an advisory that those who are in these areas to move to safer areas so that we can be able to avert imminent disaster.
So in case of emergency, we normally don't know what to do. Are there government emergency centers, phone numbers that one can use? What does one do? Yeah,
well, in every sub-location, every sub-county, every county, all the way to national government level, there are disaster response mechanisms. So there are committees in every level, all the way up to the national level. And these levels have got numbers that can be used, and the local sub-chiefs have got numbers, the local chiefs have got numbers, the committee chairman at the sub-county level have got numbers. So the numbers are there all the way up to NDOC, National Disaster Operations Center. And these numbers are known.
All right, and maybe before we release Patricia, just to come back to you, Patricia, what are your closing comments, and what would you like to advise, or what would you say in regards to just being prepared? From where you're seated, you're able to give predictions of what's coming. What should we expect?
Well, since it has been raining for quite some time, the land is already saturated. We have rivers already overflowing their banks, and with the increased rainfall that we still expect to have, the situation is expected to continue. So we still expect flooding, and we still expect landslide in landslide-prone areas. So the advice that we would give is to most people who live in prone areas, if possible, to move away. And when the season ends, they can move back to their homes. And we know the power of water. We might not be able to see how strong it is from looking with our eyes, but water is really strong. So we would like to advise people, if you're driving in an area that is normally not flooded and you see water moving, kindly avoid driving in those areas, especially within urban areas. So we will keep updating people, we will keep being on the lookout, and we will give early warning in case we expect more flooding and more heavy rainfall amounts.
Thank you very much, Patricia Nyang'oro, who's the principal meteorologist, for joining us this morning. Coming to you, Peter, rule of thumb, maybe some tips that you can give, excuse me, Kenyans in regards to just being prepared.
Yes, number one, take information very seriously. When you hear that there is going to be flooding, please take it seriously. Secondly, take precaution at a personal level. Like we have said, if you are a driver, make sure that the condition of your car is able to move in those kind of flooded situations. If you are an individual staying in a place that is prone to have flooding, please take precaution as we have advised consistently. Move if you have to move, and move early. And then, of course, there are numbers that you can call if you realize that you need help. You can reach Red Cross on our line 119. You can call that line anytime, and our emergency operations center is going to respond and come to your aid.
Okay, thank you very much. And just closing remarks from government spokesperson Colonel Cyrus Oguna. Your closing remarks and maybe advice to Kenyans generally what we should expect and where government sits in terms of just helping out for anybody who may need help.
Thank you very much, Gitonga. Just echoing what Mr. Boa has said is that it is important to obey government advisories. It doesn't help to be a hero, because dead heroes are not necessarily of any use to us. So when a government issues an advisory that you're not supposed to cross raging rivers, don't try to be a hero, because then once you're dead, and nobody will be will not find you very, very useful once you're a dead hero. But we're also informing our people at government that any advisory that has been issued by the government is the advisory that is aimed at ensuring that the safety and security of Kenyans is protected. So there is no a time when the government will issue an advisory that has got no value. And therefore, we are appealing to our people to take this advisory seriously and respond to them appropriately.
All right, thank you very much, Colonel Cyrus Oguna, who is the government spokesperson, for joining us this morning on State of the Nation. Also, thank you, Peter Abwayo, for joining us. He is the communications manager at Red Cross. And also, via telephone, we had Patricia Nyanguro, principal meteorologist, joining us this morning. That's the state